on Tuesday, March 21st, 2023. The Board of Education acknowledges that we are on the traditional territories of the Comox First Nation. We would like to thank them for the privilege of living on their land and the gift of working with their children. The second item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. That the Board of Education of School District Number 71 Comox Valley adopt the March 21st, 2023 Board meeting agenda as presented. Is there an amendment to the agenda? Or the agenda package?
Yes, the agenda package. So under my report, under item 3, there's a capital plan bylaw, and the bylaw is listed in the board package, in the board agenda, but the actual bylaw and the funded projects did not make the board package. That was provided as a handout for trustees, and I'll speak to this when that item comes up. And then when the minutes are finalized, they will include the package.
Great. Thank you. So, I will redo this. That the Board of Education of School District Number 71 Comox Valley adopt the amended March 21st, 2023 board meeting agenda. And Trustee Howe and Trustee Maysack, thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please show. It's carried. Thank you. Moving on to board meeting minutes. That the Board of Education of School District Number 71 Comox Valley adopt the February 28th, 2023 regular public board meeting minutes as presented. That's moved by Trustee McConnell-Keene and seconded by Trustee Leslie. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please show. And that's carried. Thank you. Unfinished business, we don't have any. And there's a record of in-camera meeting minutes and reports. February 27th, 2023, special in-camera meeting. February 28th, 2023, regular in-camera meeting. And March 7th, 2023, closed committee of the whole. And next we're going to move on to the board chair's report. And it's a very full agenda tonight. And I got knocked down by something last week, so I was pretty much out of commission. So the board report will be very short for this evening, but there are 3 things that I would like to share. First off is the importance of today's date, March 21st, and recognition of the following 2 items. Today is World Down Syndrome Day, with the goal of raising voices to promote inclusion, rights, and well-being. And our board and district are committed through policy, district processes, and education to equity and inclusivity of all contexts, activities, and places. And that can be found in Policy 24, Section 4A. As well, today is the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, and our board and our district are committed through policy, district processes, and education to support the education of how to act directly or as a bystander against all forms of discrimination, and to create an educational and workplace environment that promotes equality and welcomes and values diversity. And again, that's from Policy 24, Sections 3 and 4. And lastly, our district musical cannot go without a mention. The cast, pit crew, stage crew, and every single person involved in the production, execution, and delivery of Matilda deserves a standing ovation. That's my report. All right. Next, we have our very first presentation of this board in our term. And the presentation tonight is from the Comox Youth Climate Council. So take it away. And please introduce yourself to us. That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Ella Oldacre, and I'm a member of the Comox Youth Climate Council. Thank you so much for having me here today to share our group's perspective on the climate crisis and our vision for climate action in School District 71. On to the next slide. To start off, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the land we gather on is the unceded traditional territory of the Comox, Ayiksen, Satlut, and Pentlatch people, the traditional keepers of this land. The CYCC is deeply grateful for the present and ancestral care of the land and waters, and we recognize our responsibility to support their efforts to decolonize and return these lands to their original stewards. Now for some information on the Comox Youth Climate Council, CYCC for short. Do the next slide. The CYCC is a group of youth ages 13 to 25 who are dedicated to climate action in the Comox Valley. Ever since the founding of the group in 2020, we have organized numerous community events and projects. Shown at the bottom of the slide on the left is our recent Youth Climate Variety Night, where we hosted speakers, poetry, discussions, and live music and the theme of climate action. The next photo shows our Earth Day event last year, where we invited local elected officials to answer questions from a youth audience. Next is a photo of our memorial for heatwave victims, staged at the Comox Marina in July 2021. The last photo on the right is of the Sid Williams Plaza, where we painted a temporary mural. These are just a few of the many activities we've organized in the last 3 years. Just like many other youth around the world, we are extremely worried about our futures. We feel the threat of the climate crisis every day. But we have found that coming together and taking action is what gives us hope and lessens our dread for the future. We do this work because we believe there is a better way forward. We do this work because on our current path, we won't have a future safe enough to grow old. Now I would like to talk a little bit about the climate crisis. Next slide, and the one after. The 2022 IPCC report states that limiting warming to around 1.5 degrees Celsius requires global greenhouse gas emissions to peak before 2025 at the latest, and be reduced by 43% by 2030. At the same time, methane would also need to be reduced by about a third. It is almost inevitable that we will temporarily exceed 1.5 degrees, but could return to below it by the end of the century. It is very important to note that climate change is happening here and now. The Comox Valley is already being affected by the climate crisis. Some examples of this are the reduction of the Comox Glacier, the heat dome in June 2021, and more frequent drought and storm periods. As crucial as climate mitigation is, we are at a point where we must also put energy into preparing for current and projected impacts of climate change. Some risks in the Comox Valley include wetter winters, reduced snowpack, which means less water saved for drier months, earlier spring snowmelts, increased winter water flows, more frequent or intense storms with risk of damage, risks of flood, erosion, landslides, or stormwater overload. Sea level rise will be up to 1 meter by 2100, drier summers, risk of heat wave, drought, and wildfire, and ecosystem shifts with risk to habitat and biodiversity. The climate crisis disproportionately impacts marginalized communities such as Indigenous people, people of color, women, and people with disabilities. We must always keep this in mind when talking about climate change. To quote Naomi Klein, "We live in a time of multiple overlapping crises. So how about as we decarbonize and create a less polluted world, we also build a much fairer society on multiple fronts?" Some of us are worried about surviving the future with climate change, but many people have to put all their energy into worrying about surviving the day. Many solutions to climate change can simultaneously help improve these people's day-to-day lives by removing injustices. This creates a wider group of people who are involved and interested in climate action. Eco-anxiety is defined as extreme worry about current and future harm to the environment caused by human activity and climate change. Personally, eco-anxiety makes me feel extremely overwhelmed and panicked. Luckily, I've been able to surround myself by inspiring peers and put this fear into positive action. With continued work, I'm able to keep the eco-anxiety at bay. But I am just one of many youth, and I know that my privilege plays a big part in my ability to escape these negative feelings. Of all the youth who experience eco-anxiety, it is different in every single case. In some people, it can cause depression, denial, overwhelm, and paralysis. These negative effects often show up in those with a lack of social support system and a perceived disconnect from leaders. A recent study of 1,000 youth from Canada, ages 16 to 25, reports that in regards to climate change, at least 56% of respondents reported feeling afraid, sad, anxious, and powerless. 78% reported that climate change impacts their overall mental health, and 37% reported that their feelings about climate change negatively impacted daily functioning. Now, this is only 1,000 youth, but in my experience, this is an accurate description of how the climate crisis affects youth's mental health. Making changes in our personal lifestyle rarely lessens our worry for the future. The changes are so small and slow, and we are often doing it alone. Individual actions can be part of the solution, but alone will never be enough to tackle climate change. Additionally, individual action can be a distraction from being a part of a broader change, such as removing systemic barriers or creating community-wide policies with climate and social justice solutions. Personal lifestyle changes are also not always accessible. Participating in accessible, community-wide solutions and connecting with others on this powerful movement is the most effective and, in turn, is the most helpful in managing our eco-anxiety. The picture on the right was taken for our Youth Perspective on Climate Change art collection. It's a group of students from Hand in Hand Early Years Nature Education Program, and these kids are creating a banner of art that shows their love of nature. Not only does being a part of meaningful, community-wide climate action have a positive impact on the mental health of youth, it is also extremely important that our voices are heard. It is our future that is at stake, and we have important perspectives and climate action conversations. Getting involved in government can be extremely challenging and inaccessible for many youth. Disadvantaged youth who are most impacted by climate change may find it especially difficult, but these voices are the most important of all to uplift. We hope that you will be able to create a task force that makes participation in impactful community-wide solutions accessible for more youth. Now, what can be done about all of this? Our recommendation is that the school board create a climate action task force, and that it is composed of trustees, senior management, staff, parents, teachers, students, and other representatives of diverse experiences and backgrounds. That is similar to Qualicum School Board's Climate Emergency Task Force, that is led by an employed sustainability coordinator, similar to the past position held by Angela Holmes. This will ensure continuity and accountability in the organization of this task force. Our recommendation is that the task force creates a climate action policy, implementation plan, and budget, and that it uses the CYCC School Board Green New Deal as a starting point for review, adaptation, and creation of the climate action policy. Our draft School Board Green New Deal is a comprehensive document of solutions, policy ideas that focuses both on climate change adaptation and mitigation, all through an equity lens. It has the goal of improving sustainability and quality of life in the school board. It supports an equitable transformation rooted in climate justice and respectful of Indigenous peoples. It offers solutions that will provide positive examples of climate initiatives for students to learn from. Green New Deals can be adapted to suit the differences of each government, area, or organization, and the CYCC has presented Green New Deals to many of the Comox Valley municipalities. Overall, we've gotten many positive results. The topics included in our draft Green New Deal are emissions targets, low-carbon jobs, Indigenous rights, anti-racism and equity, buildings, governance processes, transportation, energy and electricity, drinking water and wastewater, food security, zero waste, education and sustainability, health, ecosystems and biodiversity, and climate adaptation. Each section includes a list of potential solutions specific to our district. I can certainly provide a copy if anyone's interested in reading it. I would like to remind you of the many reasons that the school board has the power to make impactful change for climate resilience in our community. Firstly, The school board is in direct relation to our community members through students, their families, and staff. The school board has the power to implement accessible climate solutions for our community, which in turn will cultivate hope within its students. The school district has already taken successful climate actions such as waste diversion initiatives, greenhouse gas reporting, and school garden programs. Last March, the board passed a motion which recognizes the threat of the climate crisis and our shared responsibility to take action. Our recommendation of a climate action task force is a meaningful way that the school board could take further action on this threat. We are at an absolutely critical point in time. Around the world, the decisions that are being made today are what will decide the future of our future and that of those who come after us. Schools prepare us for the future. Please invest in safeguarding our planet to ensure we even have a future to prepare for. The art piece on this slide was created by a grade 7 student at Brooklyn Elementary. Also as a part of our youth perspective on climate change art collection. The caption at the bottom reads, "We have the chance to help the world. So let's take it in our hands and try to make the world a better place." I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today about this important issue. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation.
Thank you very much. Now, the trustees have the opportunity to ask you a couple of brief questions if they wish, or clarification, any clarification on your presentation. Do any trustees have a question? Go ahead, Trustee Maysack.
I was wondering if you could please share a copy with all of us so that we can refer to it and look deeper into.
I think it's in your, yeah,
Oh, is it? Okay.
yeah, yeah. So, Trustee McConnell-Keen.
I have a clarification. So we chatted in the past, Shannon and myself and Anila and her team, and I'm just a bit curious whether we would be able to collectively chat with Brenda for some support in how this would work going forward. Is that something that would just be Shannon and I? So just a clarification.
So the board would, at the following board meeting,
Yeah.
the board discusses any presentation that we've been provided to decide if there's going to be any action that we take.
Okay.
That's how it works. The entire board has the discussion. We don't have any trustees that are formally connected to this council, but it would be a board discussion. Do I have that right? Just checking with,
Yeah.
okay.
Sorry, just to clarify, I think what Trustee Maysack was looking for was the new Green Deal document, not the
Okay.
PowerPoint
Great,
presentation.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, all right,
Yeah.
Yes,
okay,
it's not in our board package, so yes, I would like the additional information with the details, please.
great, okay. And Trustee Leslie?
Yes. Ella, back there. I can see you. And you are attending which school there?
Ms. Feld.
Aysfeld?
Yeah.
And at your high school, is there a climate action group of students?
There's Isfeld Environment Club.
There is?
Yeah.
And does the Aysfeld Environment Club collaborate with other environment clubs at other high schools, middle schools, or elementary schools? Is this something that you've seen or heard of in other schools in the district?
Yeah, I know there has been some clubs at Vanier and Highland. We've had minimal collaboration, I would say, but I see the Comox Youth Climate Council as a place for different groups around the valley to connect as kind of more of a community group rather than just in the individual schools. Yeah.
The reason I'm asking the question is you brought up some powerful points, and I think that the content is important and something that I would like to see a presence of within our schools, within the groups, within the students talking about it, meeting, gathering, connecting with other student groups in order to create a powerful student voice. So this is why I'm just curious, and these are my wonders. And so, but this is a community organization?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Good. Thank you for coming today and sharing with us.
My pleasure.
Trustee Aldinger and then Trustee Howe.
I don't actually have a question. I just want to say thank you. That was a terrific presentation, and I think also really timely for a lot of reasons. I think the IPCC just released its 6th report yesterday. We as a board received a presentation from our Director of Facilities about our district's efforts towards greenhouse gas emissions as well. So nice timing that way. And of course, we're moving towards both our budget discussions and our strategic planning. So this is very good timing, and just thanks very much.
Trustee Howe?
Yeah, thank you very much, because I echo Trustee Eldinger's remarks about the timeliness of your presentation, and I just wanted to say thanks so much for making the presentation to bring to us and having the courage to stand up in front of all of us and display it so eloquently. Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah.
Great. And I have one question. It was an acronym question, and it was on the page 6 of your slides, and it was IPCC. And I just wondered what it stood for. I could guess,
International
but
Panel on Climate Change.
okay, great. Thank you. I figured climate change were the C's, and the I might have been international, but I just wasn't quite sure. Was there anybody else? No. So thank you again very much. And whoever is here in support of the presentation, we always love for you to stay, but you don't have to stay for the rest of the meeting. You're not hostage once you're here. So thank you. If you are here in support, thank you very much for coming to support the presentation to us tonight. So thank you.
Thanks again.
Well, there you go.
Perfect.
All right, so moving on the agenda, we are now on number 8, the Open Committee of the Whole, and this is for information only that our next Open Committee of the Whole meeting is April the 11th, 2023 at 4:30 here in the school board office, and the topic will be the 2023-2024 budget. And next, I will move on to number 9, strategic direction, and I will turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you very much. Trustees, in front of you, you'll see a very colorful district news. And when you look through it, let me just read the highlights, because justice, to summarize each one individually, doesn't do it justice. I just want you to hear the common theme. Matilda captivates sold-out audiences. Cabana Souk returns a success. Spelling Bee creates a buzz around Brooklyn. Robotics 71 off to the Worlds. Humanities Week a success. Showcase concerts return. 200 students complete naloxone training. Vanier students take home gold in Ruston Provincials. Junior girls and junior boys Final Four tournament a success. Students learning to curl wraps with fun speed. Those are all indication of the wonderful things that are happening. It is so nice to see it. I keep saying it when I reflect on the journey of the last few years and to see our students back. We heard about the musical sold out. They were the hottest tickets in town, and congratulations to all the students involved and to the teachers. Lori Maisie, choreographer Emma White, and Regan Livingstone, who spent hours and hours and hours getting their young folks ready for a wonderful production. It goes on and on. I was very fortunate to be at the Spelling Bee in Brooklyn, and I'm so grateful they didn't put the photo in there with my bee hat. But as I was reading the words, I just kept thinking, boy, I'm glad I'm not up there. I am glad I'm not up there. And to listen to these young students just banging off of the words, it went for about an hour and a half, it was fabulous. But the competition was great. It was wonderful to see. The robotics, what more can we say? Great program. Again, behind the scenes, people that are working so hard. So please take a few moments and I encourage this to be shared. Anytime you're at PAC meetings, please share the successes that our district sees. And it's not one site, it's all our sites. All our buildings have something to celebrate. So I'm going to leave it at that for the district news. It'll be on our website, but please encourage you to share wonderful things. And thank you to everyone in our buildings for making this happen, for supporting kids in so many different ways, providing them with opportunities to learn beyond the walls of the classroom in different ways, getting at their spark, finding what drives them, and supporting that. So thank you very much to everyone. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the admin procedure 160. Again, this is for information only, but I'd like to put Director Hesselgrave on the spot here for a quick minute to just maybe share some of the highlights of the changes in 160, if you could.
Absolutely. So it was really a matter of bringing it up to date and creating the clarity around what is our requirement as a district. What does it mean if you're in a large high school or you're in a small elementary school? How do we compensate for doing that work? And really it's to make sure that we're on the good side of Works APC. So it was a big cleanup, but I think there's, unless you're really excited by health and safety and first aid, some of the nuance and the change is tricky, but it's really put into perspective the seriousness with which we approach the topic and making sure that those are clear followed. So in many respects are providing a great service to our schools.
Thank you.
I just have a quick comment about my work. We just redid all of this as well, and it was quite a bit of work. So thanks so much for the work that you put into it. It was a lot of work.
Thank you very much. And the last thing I'd like to share, oh, sorry, my apologies.
No worries. Can I ask a quick question? Director Hesselgrave, are you then the health and safety manager for the purpose of this
No,
AP?
the health and safety manager is one of my direct reports. So at Woolley, it was new to us. It came from the city of Dawson Creek. It was the health and safety manager there. One of the tasks that he undertook recently was to do a detailed review of it and go back and forth on updating that policy and procedure, which is we've had a gap in our health and safety manager for a while, and so we're just.
And just as a follow-up, I was curious whether I'm assuming the red print is the revisions, and does that represent like changes to the policy, or is it more updating, or the AP to reflect what's already in place and just get to actually reflect what we're doing?
The reality of what we're doing in our schools and to make sure that it's documented properly so that those school first aid attendants have something to fall back on when they're completing things.
Thanks.
Thank you. And the last section I'd like to talk about is discussing some student learning. In your package, trustees, you'll see a comprehensive report that is information to support student learning, and this report is issued by the Administration of Ed and is available on their website, and it's actually available for every district. Lots of detailed information. When you look at the report and it says last year's report for the 2022 year, that's a bit misleading, because as you dive through it, you'll see some of the figures are actually for the 19-20 school year, 20-21 school year. And what I wanted to do is just take a few moments just to share with trustees a little bit about what is this report telling us? What do we do with this information? It's very timely because over the next little while, trustees will be receiving more data from us with regards to supporting the strategic plan and strategic direction around how are our students doing. I'm going to start with, you can have a look at the breakdown of our population. I want you to take a look at the bottom figure. Current head count, 10,883. Take a look at the one right below it, what they're projecting. Projection changes over the next 10 years, 1,300 more students. That's a venue. That's just adding the school size of venue to our district. And we all know what our space is like now. Just let that one resonate with you for a bit. You can see a breakdown. You can see right now our big group is actually our grade 11s. That is a huge group for us. And once that grade 11 cohort works its way through, then our number seems to balance a bit. But that's a large group for us. In the report, you'll see throughout the sections, you'll see a gray bar, which represents the province average over the last 5 years. You'll then see an orange bar, which represents our district, and then you'll see an orange dot, which represents the latest stat. So that sort of gives you an idea. If you take a look, you heard Director Collier present to us about the framework, literacy and numeracy, and often questions come up, well, how did we identify? Where did we go with it? Why did we know that was something we needed to work on? This is an example. It's data that we collected. Now, I will just put a little star on this. This data is based on FSA results. We know how FSAs are viewed by some. The benefit of it is it does provide us with some data. So you can see how our scores are. Remember, it's very difficult to compare a group. So these are special needs. This is their score versus another group. You can't do a comparison. So I just caution people when they look at that to understand that clearly. Try not to do comparison. What we try to do is look at where that all students or Indigenous students or special needs stand within that group compared to the province. And you can see in some areas we have done exceptionally well, and in other areas we need to spend some more time. So the analysis of these scores are what form the basis for Director Collier and her work. And why do we focus on literacy and numeracy? These are the trends that we picked up. The discussions that occurred with teachers, with principals, looking at our scores overall, what does it mean? And there's an interesting chart, Josh, if I can just continue on, where it's a bit of a comparative that really helped us. And again, I'm saying this with caution, 2021, if I'm going to just take you back a little bit, the 2019-2020 school year, March of 2020, there was a major event that occurred, and we shut the system down until June of that year. The following September, so it would have been the 2020-2021 year, was the COVID year, where we opened schools in September under very strict conditions and continued. So this report will show all different types of results based on the years. So Director Collier, can you maybe explain a little bit about that chart that you'll see up there, just how to read something like that?
Microphone. Sorry, we need a microphone.
Sorry.
Sorry, you need a microphone.
Thanks. So if you look at the top line, where it says extending 60 students, that shows you in the grade 4 year of 2017-2018, for that cohort of students, 60 of them were extending. And then if you go across that top line, so where you see the gray rectangle saying 15%. What that means is that in grade 7, 15% of those 60 students were extending again. And then if you move over to the right, 75% were on track. So they moved down in their scores. So then if you look at the next line, on track. So when we're saying extending and on track, we're pretty happy with those results. Where we get more concerned is when they're emerging. So if you look at the on track line, in grade 4, there were 324 students who wrote. And of that cohort of students in grade 7, you look to the right of that, 2% of them, they increased their score to 2%. 2% of them, increased their score to extending. And then if you move to the right, 69% of those kids were on track still. And then in grade 7, 16% of them moved down to emerging. So that's a little bit more of a concern. And similarly, if you look at the next line, emerging, 103 students were emerging in grade 4. Then moving to the right, 49% of them went to on track, which is great. Yet 30% of them continued to be emerging in grade 7. So it's those sorts of numbers where we think about, and of course this is just one snapshot, but at that event you think about there's 30% of the children who in grade 4 continue to struggle in grade 7. And those trends can continue into grade 10 as well. So the work of the framework is a couple of things. One thing is, of course, to address those trends and support kids in their literacy and numeracy scores and their understanding, yet also to add a couple of additional data points for us to check in as a district, so that we're not only looking at FSA scores, but we look at other literacy and numeracy results, so that we have, as a district, more data to work with, but also as schools, they just have more fine-grained information to know exactly how to support kids with supplemental learning or intervention in those areas.
Thank you. So that shows how some of this data is being translated into action at the district level. Moving on, we'll just take a look. We get into grade to grade transition. Again, this is 1920. So this is the very start of it. But this is the data that we had at that point in time. And you can see the transition rates are increasing. So more kids are making successful transitions over time. Not as much of gaps as we're seeing. Widened a bit in 1920. We understand why it may have, and I'll share an example a little later on where we had great improvement, and then that year hit, we saw a gap, and then now over time we've seen that close as well. So if we can go to the slide, the completion rates 2020-21. So this is an interesting slide. This slide is reported on a 6-year completion rate. The reason I say it's, is that it? Yeah. The reason I say it's interesting is most of the reporting we're asked to do is based on 5-year. So it's interesting that they use the 6. However, the one thing you've heard us talk about, so in this particular case, you can see the gray area representing the province, and I'm just looking at BC residents. And then you can also see where the dot is representing our score, which in that particular year that's 2021, was 80.5. And it said the province at that year was running at about 91. Here's an interesting thing. This stat includes NIDES Navigate. And the reason I bring that up is there's something called understanding the district of responsibility. So when a student is with us at NIDES in grade 9 or 10, their last school, and they leave us, we're considered the school of record. And that's what, and then we end up, it counts on the stats. And there's quite a long explanation, and Director Dixon, if you want to take a minute, maybe go through some of, just some of the understandings around that.
Thank you. If you look, I'd like to summarize it as this. You see the gray window there. That's a 5-year range where the ministry's been. Our orange dot is where we were at that year. The orange line is kind of where we've moved in the past few years. And when we factor in what Superintendent is mentioning around the NIDES data, if we have a student that comes to us from 3 other school districts and comes to us in their grade 11 or 12 year to navigate NIDES and unfortunately doesn't complete or moves away, that non-graduation status works against us. So through our local calculations, we believe that where that orange dot would be if we peeled out all the Navigate NIDES data would be roughly about 7% higher. So imagine that orange dot sliding over closer to that 90-ish% provincial average. And this is some of the information that we're dissecting as we get more and more access to our local data and working with our data analysts on how can we track the success of our students both in this 6-year but also 5-year window. And if you go to the website, you can actually put your mouse over any of those orange dots in any of this report and it'll explain the numbers in even more detail. So it's very interesting.
Thank you. I'll share I happen to have the 6-year completion rate where we don't have our DL program or OL program included. And as Director Dixon said, that represents about 80%, 80.5. If we remove the distance ed, our number jumps to 92.1. And that's quite, talking to other districts that have big OL programs, that's quite common to see that much of a difference. So it's just a point of information. It's just understanding, and you can do the same thing with a 5-year rate. And these are informations that we'll bring forward. It's always good to understand. We take this information and we feed it back to our schools, engage in conversations around, asking them, where are your graduation rates based on your numbers? What do you see? Because it's always reported as districts versus individual schools.
I have a question on that
Sure.
point. Does the Indigenous graduation rate, is it affected by NIDES as well?
Yes, it is. Not as much, but I'm just seeing if I have that information for us at hand. I have 6-year completion. Ironically, it was about the same as it was with DI and without. Now again, I'm going back. This was 2020. So we have to take that into consideration because that's when NIDES was really jumping that year. If you recall, we grew by 1,400 in the month of August alone. So our results will be skewed because of that year. But a detailed report will be coming to the board around the graduation. Josh, if I can go to the next slide. This is an interesting slide. Completion rates over time of Indigenous versus all students. So if you take a look, the orange circles represent the all students and the blue are Indigenous students. You can take a look at the gap. So in about 2010, 2011, or actually 8, 9 was when we first started an effort to how do we close that gap? And if you work your way over, you can see 2018, 2019, where the gap was non-existent. And then 1920, and what happened in 1920? I was understanding the pandemic. So we look forward to the continued collection of that data and what it tells us. Moving on, you'll see the next page has some EDI, and I'll ask Mr. Manning if he can talk a little bit about the EDI.
Well, EDI is the Early Development Instrument, and so it is a survey really that kindergarten teachers give to or partake in for all their incoming kindergarten children. And so we've been using the EDI probably for the last, 15 years. And we're looking at it for trends for when early learners come into the school district. And it told us for a while we were at a 42% at-risk rate, which is a bit alarming. And so there's all the categories that a EDI learner undertakes, whether it's physical, social, emotional, language, communication. And if they're considered vulnerable in one or more of those, that's where our vulnerability rate gets expressed. So the same kind of information is being shared here, where what our trend was over the last 5 years, where we currently are with the dots, and where we're moving to. And I think one thing that's good news in this situation is with the emphasis on EDI data, we've been able to target certain areas. We had projects in the northern end of the school district for several years when Alan Douglas was working as a director. We have now a district principal of early learning, and Director Collier works extensively in the early learning world with Lisa Peterson-Skeen, and doing some great stuff around ECDs. So it's a huge focus for us.
Thank you, Anne. Yes.
I just have one little question. It's probably a Brenda question. It might be too big to be answered right now, but the percentage of numbers. So if we know that things are happening and we're sort of taking action, we're doing some progress in some districts, and we've connected with our teachers and are aware that there's some issues happening at that age. Is that, I can't recall, just because I get sometimes overwhelmed with the budget, do we have like some supports in the budget for that in anticipation of that happening for the next school year?
Absolutely. We've used a framework to support student goal or school goals.
Yeah.
So one of the things that schools do is they identify the area. I'll use a program that was started at Quinish around literacy. They identified the need based on their results. They identified a goal on how to go about it, and we were able to support them with some funding, and it helped with some release time and a few other things. And at the end of the year, they were able to show how their results improved. They continued the following year and again. So that's the whole, and that program was opened up to schools right across the district. Identify a goal area that you wanted, and support would be there as they move forward. And that is tied directly into the FESL report, which is.
Trustee McConnell had her hand up.
Sorry, and just to follow up. So last year when we approved the amended, or the annual budget, we set aside $160,000 for those framework goals in schools. And so that was being utilized throughout this year. And we hope to be able to do that the same for this upcoming budget, but we'll bring those recommendations forward.
Thank you.
I have sort of a facilities question about one of the projects that are happening, supported by the CBRD around AEDI. Eighth wave data showed 33% sort of vulnerable in one or more areas. So the Early Years Collaborative, which Lisa's now active on as well, is working in on the Building Connections project in both, well, they sort of are still working in the North Comox Valley, I know that, and then South Comox Valley as well. And one of the things that they've indicated they're having a hard time with is because they're just sort of a focus group at this time, they don't have equipment. And I brought up that they should look at using SD71 facilities for some of that, bringing together of sort of all families and such, but they said that they weren't sure about equipment, and I said that's something we could definitely reach out to Lisa about. But has that ever happened? I'm just curious. Sort of like gym facility equipment, is that something that they would be able to look into?
Sure.
Sorry, if it's wrong.
So it certainly, we have had groups use School District 71 facilities, and I think it's quite easy to make it working through our online booking system base. And you can request equipment, depends what age you're looking for. So we could, I can have a further discussion through that as well, and specific around those groups, certainly. But we can make that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to point out on this chart, this chart works the opposite way of all the other charts we were looking at. The higher you go on the vulnerability is not a good thing, but if you look at the very bottom one, vulnerable one or more stat, you'll notice that we used to be way up at 42%, and so it is sliding down back into a provincial range.
I'll show you the last set of data that I'll talk about is the student satisfaction surveys that are issued every year that every student or school completes. And you questions that are asked, do you feel welcome at school? I'm going to draw your attention to the second one. Are you satisfied with what you're learning at school? The reason I'm going to draw your attention to it, when we get results, it's important that we cross-reference them. So take a look at, are you satisfied with what you're learning at school? And look at our secondary. Just have a look where they're situated, roughly. Now, Josh, can you move ahead to the next slide? Take a look at post-secondary, keep going, career. Look at the second question. Are you satisfied that school's preparing you for post-secondary ed? So in one slide, we have some students indicating they're not satisfied, and then the next one saying they're satisfied it's preparing. Higher. So it's an interesting slide. The reason I bring this to your attention is these are the types of things that we get into a good discussion with our school leaders. So what causes that? And one of it really focuses on post-secondary education. Does it tell us what part? Are our students that are entering trades, do they feel prepared? Are our university-bound students? So it's really important. Does this happen more because it doesn't break out by grade level? Is this more grade 12? Would they see that? Is the connection there with the younger? So it's almost with every bit of information we get, there's more questions to dig into and ask. And these are great conversations that we encourage our schools to have. And I know that these are topics that with our district student group, where we can engage in asking them these types of questions.
Trustee Keating has a question.
Sure.
So I compared this with last year because, as you recall, last year I asked the concern I had regarding student satisfaction and looking at the numbers. And I'm just wondering, what you talked about putting something in process in talking to students how they feel more safe in school and how they would feel they're satisfied with what learning. And I'm wondering with their expectations are different than what the district's expectations are, and there's a bit of a disconnect there. Sometimes when kids go to school, they think they're going to do something one day and something happens and that could affect their that day. Well, I thought I was going to have math today. Today I got social studies, so I'm not happy with what I'm learning at school today. So I'm wondering, is when you're talking about students, about their safety and their satisfactions, are you talking about with them at both the elementary, middle school, Cumberland and at that, and what type of conversations are we having with them to determine, is it are they really feeling that way? Is this a true snapshot of how it's feeling? Or as you're saying, is there something that day they took that survey that made them feel that way?
Great questions. It's hard to determine when students engage in the survey where they're at. I know our schools have focus groups, our high schools, our middle schools, where they're surveying students. Tell us about what's happening. One of the common ones that occurs all the time is when we get to course selection, which is about this time, where schools are saying, what kind of things are you interested in, what kind of courses, and those conversations happen. I know our assistant superintendent spent some time discussing that with the student council voice to see how are they feeling. Anything to?
It was very interesting because we had the student council there and they were all responding to surveys in general. When do you think students take surveys seriously? When do they write them off? And they were a little all over the place, but they felt in general that there was a large portion of students that did not take the surveys very seriously, and they felt that maybe a better response in terms of students being genuine would have an optional survey, and the students who take this survey are students who want to answer those questions. So it's interesting. I don't know how we get around that.
I guess the follow-up to that question is when we look at our data, and we look at data, and the data has there, as we look at programming and funding and where we go next, and if the surveys are not as accurate as what we are, and then they're not taking them seriously at the student level, then how do we know that the resources that we're putting in to the schools to support students then are actually going where they're needed if we're not sure if some of the data we're getting back is not an accurate reflection of actually what's happening? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, and that's a good question. I think where you're more accurate when you use more forms of data. If we're relying just on one survey to determine the effectiveness of something, I think that's where we run the risk of the data not being 100% accurate. But if it's a survey, and it's this, and it's this, and it's this, whatever they may be, and then we're looking at all of that to form an answer or to give us a paint a picture, we're far clearer than we would if we just rely on one.
I think if we were to look at the student learning survey, the YDI, which is a grade 11 survey, the McCreary report, combine all those together and say, hey, are they all saying the same thing? If they are, we know we're probably getting as accurate an answer as we're going to get.
So I'm going to go to Trustee Leslie next. And we've been on this important agenda item for almost half an hour, and we have an hour left in our meeting and quite a bit left to do in the meeting. And so I don't want to stop questions. I just want to be mindful of the time. So Trustee Leslie, over to you. And then how much more information did you have to share with us?
That's it for this evening. I encourage people to view this, and just to let the board know, we will be bringing more data in subsequent meetings.
Trustee Leslie.
I understand that this is a snapshot. This is one source of data for surveys. FSAs are one source of data, and completion rates. I understand you're bringing a more fulsome set of data, and the data needs to be triangulated so that we can look at students' responses with a greater perspective. To your point, Trustee Caton. Also, I just want to reflect on the fact that as we don't know the students in the snapshot, there were 619 students that took this survey, and in our role as governors for the school district, it behooves us to listen to those students. We don't know if they're sincere or not, but what we do know is that 20% of the secondary students, 619 of them, are saying that they aren't satisfied that what they're learning in school is preparing them for the future. And I think it's important to look at that information, knowing that we will receive more and it will be triangulated, but to hear it, to let it sink in, and to understand that it's okay to receive a result like this, because what we do with that result is we acknowledge gaps, we make a plan, and then we collect more data and we address it. We look at how are we doing? Did we address that gap? And in the data, we never looked at the numeracy assessment data for graduation assessments. And literacy, we're looking around 80%, 70% for Indigenous students, but the numeracy, the all student was 40%, 20% for Indigenous, 30% for special needs. And when looking at those results for literacy assessments for our high school children, it's interesting because then you look at the secondary results for is school preparing you for your future, and 40% say they are, and the results for numeracy especially are reflecting that, as well as are you satisfied with what you're learning at school? Those percentages for secondary and for elementary are at 20%. So, I'd love to look at a little exploring, looking at the context of that question and trying to understand it as a trustee. So I look forward to viewing more data and to having those conversations, and also to do some analysis. And I think that information will really support all of us in the direction of our strategic plan and some of the priorities. So I appreciate looking at the data. I always think that data is something that tells a story. This is just one snapshot, but it provides us a lens that we can look through so that we know where to go next. And as our role as trustees, it's important that we understand how to govern with the information and the data that we're looking at. Because if we don't have the data, we don't know how to best support our students and families in terms of the strategic plan and policy. Thank you.
Maybe last question, and then the superintendent can close this section off, if that's all right with everyone.
Yeah, I just wanted to know with our results, with the 20%, and especially with the, are you satisfied with what you are learning at school? Would this be a standard where we would take action and dive deeper into this because of those results? Or are we gonna sit, is this where we're gonna wait for, again, more data to come in that's maybe more holistic? Or is this something that we want to, again, dive deeper into?
Yes, we would want to dive deeper into this. This is all the survey results go directly back to schools. So one of the things that we ask schools is take a look at your results and have a conversation. Find out what it is and where do we go. No matter what the result is, FSA, any data that they get, and I know they're having those conversations at the table. What is it telling us? One piece of data, and we're not, hanging everything on that one particular piece, but it's the story. So I just encourage people to look at it. There's some very interesting numeracy data, but I'm not going to take more time. We will be bringing more back to the board.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, moving on to the assistant superintendent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As always, the exciting enrollment update. We, as of right before this meeting, we have 681 students who have registered for next school year. 541 of those are kindergarten students. We're projecting, the growth that we projected to the ministry was a growth of 103 students, and we're well on our way to hitting that mark, surpassing it. We have 5.5 months before school starts, so we just watch that all the time and keep our eyes on it, keep our eyes on the hot spots, and so do our principals in their schools. They notify us right away if they're feeling a crunch. Right after spring break, we kind of move into our staffing allocation meetings with all of our schools, so they're keeping a close eye on all those numbers, and we'll talk at that time. Try to make sure we have just right fit for their staffing based on their number of students. Any questions on enrollment? Okay. Principal postings. Just wanted to give you a big update. We have a posting currently out right now for elementary and secondary principalships. It closes on March 31st, which is not ideal for us because that's right in the middle of our spring break. But it kind of works provincially because lots of districts are coming out of their breaks. And so we'll get on that very quickly after spring break. I think we have interview dates set for the 21st of April, moving on those anticipated vacancies. So we'll see what happens and how many people apply. Any questions there? Yes?
Sorry, I might have missed this. How many vacancies are there?
That's a bit of a running target. We know there will be.
I didn't miss the
vacancies.
answer.
How many, we're not sure yet exactly. We still have some information to come in from our principal group. So we think we've got a handle on how many, but we're throwing this posting out to see what we get. So we might have more than we thought.
So it's a single posting for
Yes.
potentially more than one? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
Both at elementary and secondary. Okay. The last one I have is district calendar update. There's a briefing note on page 42. If you'd like to refer to that and read that, just a reminder that we set the calendar 2 years ago for the next 3 years. So next year is the third year of our 3-year calendar, and we do that in order to help our faculty and staff prepare for years in advance, because lots of people like to look at next year's calendar to plan a variety of things. And sometimes what happens is we wind up needing an amendment to the calendar. And one such amendment is in your briefing note. It talks about Reconciliation Day, which occurs on September 30th. Next school year, that happens to be on Saturday. And the province only recently announced, fairly recently, that they would honor that as a stat holiday. So we were waiting for that. That's why it hadn't appeared in next year's calendar yet. And they have made the decision to have that stat holiday occur on October 2nd, which is the Monday after Reconciliation Day. And they've asked school districts to try to align themselves with that. So that's the first amendment that we are bringing forth, so that October 2nd will be a stat holiday for the school district. The other calendar amendment is moving August 31st into September 5th as a professional development day, or a non-instructional day, I should say. And that's been the desire of the CDTA for a while, wanting to move some of those days back into the calendar. It works very well for us because QP also has an extra day now in the calendar, so it aligns for everybody, and it allows us to be able to have schools meet with their entire staff on that day for professional development and non-instructional activities. And we think it fits in really well. The nice thing about these proposed amendments is they don't change this year's calendar time one bit. We won't have to add any minutes to the day. We'll just keep the same amount of time in next year's calendar that we have in this year's calendar when it comes to how many minutes of instruction. Are there any questions about the calendar? Oh, one thing I need to mention, this is one of those school act items that has to sit in the public for 30 days. So this is one of those rare occasions where it's going to sit there for a month, and then at next month's board meeting, we will be able to move that forward. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Now, moving on to the Secretary Treasurer section of the report. And the first item is the provincial budget 2024 consultation.
Yes, thank you. So the board chair and myself received an email from the Select Standing Committee on Finance and extending the opportunity to present again this year. So they are doing in-person presentations in Campbell River sometime in late May or June. We just need to submit an application to the committee to request an audience with the Select Standing Committee, and that would need to go in by Thursday, March 30th. And so if the board is interested in making another presentation, we could do that. But at the time you submit your request, you have to identify 3 topics that you'd like to speak on at the Select Standing Committee. So we have been successful in the past. Last year, one of the submissions we made was around the annual facility grant, and we did actually see an increase in the annual facility grant this year. So that was, I think it is a worthwhile thing to present to the committee, and and sometimes we do see support for education K-12. So I was bringing this to the attention of the board and wondering if the committee does want to submit an application to present, and then identify the 3 topics that we'd like to present on.
So the board as a whole makes this decision because we don't have a committee,
Yes.
right? So So is there anybody who has questions about this process? I know some of the trustees have presented with other hats on or watched it. And all of the asks are all financial. Is that correct? Generally?
Well, it's related to the development
us,
of next
right.
year's provincial budget.
Right.
So it would be, so for example, one of the things we've talked about as a board is operational funding for childcare. So that could be one of the topics we may want to present to the Select Standing Committee on. Another challenge that we have is the operational funding it takes for growing districts to buy portables. Each portable is around 350,000. So next year we're adding 2 to Cumberland. So that's 700,000 out of our operating dollars that impacts other areas of our, delivery of education to students. So that's another item that we could raise again. We have talked about that in the past. And then, but we wanted, before we submitted, we need a decision if the board does want to make a presentation, and then to kind of get a sense of the 3 topics.
Okay. Trustee Kate.
I think presenting it is a great idea. It doesn't hurt to ask. In the past, we have asked, and we're not the only school district. I think the theme was childcare was a theme, and facilities grant was a theme, and portables was a theme. But I'm also looking at other things our districts has to fund, and I did ask the superintendent about our plan, and maybe through him to Dr. Hesselgrave, is that we have some infrastructure, whether it's in our trades department, whether it's upgrading our machinery and our tools. So I'm talking about other costs that school districts incur that they could use in implementation of funding for. And I know we have a plan in place, but I'm just thinking that there's other things that districts need operating funds for other than portables and daycare that I think an infusion of cash will be very supportive in meeting the needs of our students and their future education processes. So I think that we need to do that, but I also think we need to also think outside the box and what else do we need as a district other than the standard daycare, portables, and other stuff? What are we looking to support our students that we could extra funding would support them in a way? And that's just my thoughts.
We've talked about as a senior team additional, the significant challenges around mental health, but also in regards to facilities, we have also talked about the topic that we had the presentation on this evening of, the initiatives to reduce our carbon initiatives, and those, even just the significant extra cost to have electric buses or an electric trades vehicle, which isn't currently funded. So that may be another suggestion for a presentation, and I could put Director Hesselgrave on the spot to talk a little bit about that particular topic if the board was interested.
Trustee Aldinger.
Thank you very much. That was pretty much what I was going to say as well, that in light of last meeting's presentation and tonight's presentation, I think that I personally would be very supportive of requesting funding to tackle some of the greenhouse gas reduction, the targets that we have that are, where I sit, look impossible to meet unless we get more funding from the province.
So are we looking for a motion?
Yes, I think so.
Would somebody like to make a motion?
I can make a motion. So is it a motion to create or submit an application to present at the budget 2024 consultation process?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I'm just making sure that Heidi got that motion on the fly. Okay, is there a seconder? Okay. Thank you, Trustee Maysack. Is there any further discussion?
Sorry, I just was hoping for clarity around the 3 topics.
Do we have to decide tonight?
Well, we're heading into spring break on Friday, and the application is due Thursday, March 30th. So perhaps if trustees could submit their thoughts maybe to the chair, that then we could decide, but it wouldn't be at a motion. It would just be then, based on what we've heard, making a decision around the 3 topics.
Trustee Howe?
And then would you encourage us to also offer up our services to present if we were interested in doing that? Because I would imagine that you're going to trust me to go with who to come over to do the presenting or two.
Yes, so the person that's on the application is the person that gets to present, as we found out 2 years ago in Nanaimo. So it was my name on the application, so I was the one that needed to present. So I would need to know which trustee was wanting to do the presentation. It may be the board chair that would present.
I'd be happy to present. I know that our board chair presented last year. If the trustees are fine with that, then I'm happy to present. And Trustee Caton, we're gonna need clarification on the ask that you had, because I don't think I wrote it down properly.
Well, I think that I was in the minority there, but I think that, I think we also should think outside the box and what does our school district really need to support our students. I know that we had a plan in place financially to upgrade, and correct me if I'm wrong there, Superintendent. I know that having children in the shops, whatever, some of our materials needs to be upgraded to meet the new modernization that's happening with respect to whether it's automotive, woodworking, drafting, and all the other stuff that goes on there. That costs a lot of money to upgrade our shops, am I correct? And I know that we have a plan in place, but it's also nice, maybe the government could support that, considering that they are encouraging students to go into the trades and occupations. Let's have them support school districts in that endeavors. That would be my thought.
So then perhaps if trustees could submit their ideas to myself and the Secretary Treasurer by Friday, and then we'll collect them all and we'll find a way to communicate with the trustees so that we can prioritize the list with the input of the district and the trustees. Does that work for everyone? Mm-hmm. Okay. Go ahead, Trustee Maysack.
I was also just gonna, in light of our presentation tonight, there was also some great topics that we've been recommended for the new deal draft, and that maybe there's some things in there that resonates with trustees as well for funding that we, of course, would like to achieve, but don't have funding, unfortunately, always for all of these great initiatives. So I just wanted to remind everybody about all the different suggestions.
Thanks. We would actually, I think, first need to adopt their Green New Deal before we looked for funding for it. But but thank you for moving us forward on that that thought. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion to submit an application to budget 2024 consultation, I think that's what you said. Head down. That's carried. Thank you. Okay. Next is the budget development process timeline.
Yes, so on page 45 of the agenda package is the finalized budget development process. So the next item after spring break would be the open committee of the whole meeting on April 11th. And that'll be the initial discussion around the preliminary operating grant announcements and some high-level discussions. And it's an opportunity for staff and partner groups to present their requests. And so it's early in the process. We'll be working on the budget document over spring break and trying to get a sense of the overall revenue and then the cost pressures that will be applied against that. So the budget website is up and running as of today, and we're starting with the initial information, and then as we go along in the process, we'll add to the site and have an opportunity for the general public to make submissions. But as always, when it's an open committee of the board, the public is welcome to come to the committee meeting if there's an interest in our next year's budget, the 23-24 budget.
Thank you. Any questions? Trustee Aldinger.
Given the proximity of spring break, will invitations go out to the partner groups this week to ensure that everyone knows that it's coming right up after spring break?
So we have already issued 2 invitations and notified the groups that generally are contribute to the budget development. And so we've asked for 2 representatives from each of our partner groups and stakeholders for the budget. So we've done 2 emails to that effect. And so we can remind them again one more time that April 11th at 4:30 is a riveting discussion on the district finances.
Any more questions on this? Okay, next is the capital plan bylaw.
Yes, so this, we received a letter from the ministry on March the 9th, and it was our capital plan bylaw response letter. And so when we received the capital plan bylaw, or capital plan response letter, so this is in relation to the submission we made at this time last year. I believe we finalized it at the May board meeting with our capital plan asks. And so this is the response of the projects that they're going to approve to go forward in the 23-24 year. So on the minor capital projects, we received permission for 5 projects. So we have electrical upgrade at Highland Secondary, which was funded at $440,000. We have interior construction upgrades at GP Vanier for $249,500. We have, and this was the handout that we, it was, I apologize, it wasn't in your board package, so we handed it out earlier this evening.
Yeah.
And at Glacier View Alternate School, we have an HVAC upgrade for $310,000. And then at Denman Island Community School, we have a HVAC upgrade that was funded under the carbon neutral window, and that's for $489,000. And both of these projects we're really excited about because that will help us with our GHG reductions. And then finally, we have approval for accessible playground at Denman Island Community School, and that will be funded at $195,000. So over the total for the projects that are funded under minor capital are $1,683,500. So in order to start accessing the money, we request that the board pass the capital plan bylaw, and the bylaw is in the handout that you received. And we would request all 3 readings so we can go ahead and start drawing our annual facility grant funding and getting started on these projects. So we have some recommendations in your agenda package for the 3 readings.
And my understanding is for the first reading, whichever trustee would like to make do the first reading, they will also read under the capital bylaw the section that starts with "now therefore the board enacts as follows," and then finish at the end of point number 2. Is that correct? So is there a trustee that would like to do the first reading? Trustee Howe?
So I just start it now, therefore.
You start, do you do the recommendation?
That the school district number 71. Give it first reading to the capital plan bylaw, 2023-2024. CPSD 01.
Yes.
Now therefore the board enacts as follows. The capital bylaw of the board for 2023-24 capital plan as approved by the minister to include the supported capital projects specified in the letter addressed to the Secretary, Treasurer, and Superintendent dated March 9th, 2023 is hereby adopted. This capital bylaw may be cited as school district number 71, Comox Valley capital bylaw number 2023-24 CPSD 71-01. Read the first time on the 21st day of March 2023.
Okay, perfect. Seconder, thank you, Trustee Maysack. Any discussion? All those in favor, please show. Down. That carries. thank you. My understanding for the second reading is that other section does not need to be read. Is that correct? Okay. So is there a trustee that would like to do the second reading? Trustee Masak?
That the school district number 71 Comox Valley gives second reading to the capital plan bylaw number 2023-24-CPSD 01.
Is there a seconder? By Trustee Leslie. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Now, my understanding with the third reading in the same meeting, it would need to be unanimous. Is that correct?
So we do need to, yes, that in accordance with section 68(4) of the School Act,
Yeah.
if we're going to do all three readings, we need to pass a motion to that.
Right. So this one would need to be
Yes.
passed unanimously. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a trustee that would like to do the next recommendation? Trustee McCannell-Keen.
Recommendation is that in accordance with section 68(4) of the School Act, all three readings of the capital bylaw number 2023-24 CPSD 01 be given at tonight's meeting.
And is there a seconder for that? Trustee Howe? And all those in favor? Down. It's carried unanimously. And the final recommendation? I'll read it. Thank you. Trustee Leslie.
That the school district 71 Comox Valley give third and final reading to the capital bylaw number 2023-24-CPSD-01.
Is there a seconder? Trustee Masak. Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's down, that's carried. Thank you very much. Next, we're going to move on to policies. Policy 18, which is a revision of our accumulated operating surplus and internally restricted funds. And the recommendation will be to be brought forward at tonight's meeting because there is no 30-day consultation process required. And how do we do that? So we are going to move down to the recommendation regarding policy 18, that the Board of Education of School District Number 71 Comox Valley adopt changes to policy 18 as presented. Is there a mover for that? Trustee Howe. And a seconder, Trustee Leslie. Is there any discussion? Secretary Treasurer.
I just wanted to note the highlighted word on page 47. So the ministry had advised us that we could either have our unrestricted operating surplus either based on revenue or expenses. And so we thought that expenses is a more relevant criteria for this district. So the policy that is before you is highlighting that the contingency reserve will be based on operating expenses.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the trustees? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of adopting the changes to policy 18? That's carried, thank you. And the next recommendation is that the board, and this is a new policy, that the Board of Education of School District Number 71 Comox Valley adopt policy 26 as presented. And is there a mover for that motion, please? Trustee Masak. The seconder, Trustee Howe. Sure. Are there any questions regarding policy 26, which is financial planning and reporting? Secretary Treasurer?
So this is a new required policy from the Ministry of Education, and so it was developed based on their guidance, and they did review the policy and provide their support for how it was drafted. So this will make us compliant with the new accountability requirements in legislation.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further questions, all those in favor, please show. It's down, thank you, that's carried. All right, next is more for the Secretary Treasurer, the projected financial update.
So this is a demonstration of the policy in action. So in the policy you just passed, there's a requirement or an expectation that projections will start coming to the board in the January board meeting. So this is the very first, well, we've always presented on district finances, but not in as such a formal way. So this is a formal report of an analysis of where the district is at from July 1st, 22 to March 15, 23. So we're continuing to amend our reporting tools. And so this is prepared as of March 15th. Normally we present as at the end of the month, but it just is an overall comparison to our amended annual budget, which we adopted at the last board meeting, and our current revenues that we've received and our status of our current expenses. So this report that's on page 52 of your board package indicates currently at this point in time, we're trending towards a small surplus of just over $400,000. So we'll see these reports, which is just a basic summary of schedules 2A and 2B in your bylaws and financial statements. So the operating focuses on the operating side of the district. So I'm happy to receive feedback regarding the report, and just the additional documents that go from page 52 to 56 are just the supporting documents that help gather the information. So these documents, starting on page 53, are what the new data analyst Ilana has been preparing. And so this is using a tool called Power BI, and it has very flexible, easy to read information that we're able to generate directly out of our accounting GL and software. So, and we're continuing to work on those reporting tools. Ilana has been fantastic with helping us generate some information. So hopefully you find the tools useful and the information helpful.
Trustee Howe?
Are you happy about it? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's making everything easier?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's really important for the board to know where how we're doing financially, and how we're trending, and having the tools to generate that information more clearly and easily is helpful for the finance department, but also for trustees.
Yeah, it's an approachable document. I was okay with it, so.
Thank you.
Can you show on page 52 where the 400?
So that's so if you look on the left-hand side of the document, you'll see the column that says actual, and so it shows that our total operating revenue as of March 15th was $72,426,332, and then our expenses as of that date total $72,024,350, leaving a net operating revenue of $401,982 at the bottom. And I haven't included the capital purchases in that, or because we don't know what the year-end operating accumulated surplus might be and what our actual capital purchases from operating are at this point. So the information on the right-hand side is the information from the amended budget as a comparison.
Is there any more questions from trustees? Thank you very much. Trustee Maysat?
I was just wondering if you anticipated any other significant changes, because I mean, obviously the homestay revenue, that's like funneling right from the international tuition in, and I guess another question is that all done for the year then, or is that also going to be changing?
No, we're just showing, so our auditors require that we report the net amount of homestay. So embedded in the amount that's in the annual budget, amended annual budget, includes, because we receive that homestay tuition, but then we flow it out to the homestay families. So it's reflected both as a revenue and an expense. And so in our year-end financial statements, we net that out as per the Auditor General requirements. So I just wanted to show that the international tuition is inflated because it does include the homestay, but I wanted to back it out so you were aware that the tuition will be less than what's shown there, because it's mostly a flow through for that portion.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much for that piece. And next, the Accessible BC Act.
Yes, so this is another new piece of legislation. There's a briefing note in page 57 of your board package. So there's an Accessible BC Act, and it's requiring school districts to develop by September 1st an accessibility committee, an accessibility plan, and a tool to receive feedback on accessibility, such as emails to receive comments. And so we did, several senior staff attended a webinar last week around the new legislation, and we will be bringing more information to the board regarding this legislation and how we'll comply in future committee meetings.
Do the trustees have any questions? Trustee Kate?
So when you talk about accessibility, that can mean a number of things. So has there been definition of what exactly the Accessibility Act will cover? Are we talking about classrooms? We're talking about playground? Like, what is it defining and what we're looking at?
So in the current legislation, there's only a requirement that we have a committee and we have a plan. And there's not a requirement at this point to make any changes or to require us to change our facilities or our access. And we have to have a mechanism for consultation. So, but it does, the legislation does include other components other than physical accessibility. So it talks about inclusion, adaptability, diversity, and so we did receive some just high-level information at this point around what it entails, but at this point, it's not specific around, facility upgrades at this point.
Are there any other questions?
Did you want to add anything else?
No, I would just say, Trustee Kate, that yes, it does include physical accessibility as well as accessibility to services, support, all of those things. But as the Secretary and Treasurer pointed out, we do have to have a plan, a committee, a way to access public input in place for the 2023-24 school.
Trustee Maysack?
Yeah, I was wondering if they had given us any deadlines for, putting our plan into action and actual facilities. Is this something that we're going to want to start thinking forward, in our budget process and such for anything that we might need to change?
So at this point, there's no timeline on that we've received so far. The initial requirement is to develop a plan, and then from that there may be fines and things like that. And it's more, I think, to make sure that we're collaborating on the issues, we're addressing the challenges, and we're taking into consideration, for example, on the playground for Denman Island, it'll be an accessible playground. So every time we have the opportunity, we're going to address that need. And so the ministry, previously they used to fund only an accessible playground if there was an identified student at that particular school, but now every playground that the ministry funds is going to be an accessible playground. So there's the kind of things that's a culture shift that we're just in the process of starting. So.
Thank you. Anything else?
Nope. I think I've had enough show tonight.
Trustees may have had more questions. Vice Chair Leslie, over to you for the retirements and recognition.
Okay, retirements. We'd like to acknowledge Janice Kilgore. She is an online learning clerk at Knights. She's retiring effective October 31st, 2023, after 14 years of service. And thank you so much for your service.
Thank you, Vice Chair Leslie. Next, we're moving on to section number 10 of our agenda package, which is the board standing committee reports. And there's an extensive section in our package, pages 59 to 132, that provides information from our open committee of the whole that we had on March the 7th, and with the presentations from our international student program and from our environmental sustainability update for your information. And then I'm looking for a trustee to move the following recommendation.
That the Board of Education of School District 71 of Comox Valley receive the open committee of the whole report as presented.
There's seconder, Vice Chair Leslie. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? All right, and then there was a recommendation from the closed committee of the whole, March 7th, 2023. Trustee Maysack?
That the Board of Education of School District Number 71, Comox Valley, adopt changes to Policy 7, Presentation Delegation as presented.
And seconder? Trustee Howe. I'm wondering, Superintendent, do you want to speak to this briefly?
Sure. So you can see how interesting.
All that paper you got to get through to the next section.
I'll get it rolling soon.
Page 133.
So if you take a look at when we looked at our presentation and delegation practices in our district, we did a comparison, a research of other districts and what was common. So what you see reflected is a very common where the distinction is not made between delegation and presentation. It's treated one is the same, and I think tonight was an excellent example of the process behind it, where the information comes to the board ahead of time for the presentation. At the presentation is a few moments afterwards for questions. There's a time limit on it, and no decisions are made at the meeting. So like tonight, no decisions are made. That's referred, and could happen at a later date for further engagement by the trustees around that. So I think this, the other change I want to just focus is when there is a request for a presentation, it's made and the board chair in conjunction with the ST and the superintendent shall determine where the best place for that presentation, and ultimately if the request is granted, and which venue. Is it better at a committee of the whole open? Is it better at a board meeting, depending on the topic? So there is a process now that will be followed. There are some strict timelines and guidelines. Again, part of it is receiving the information ahead of time so that everyone's aware of what's being presented. So this is very consistent to practice throughout our province in terms of presentation.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the trustees? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? Down, it's carried. Thank you. All right, we're moving on to number 11, board business. It is 8:44. We have 4 items plus public question period. Over to you, Vice Chair Leslie.
Yes, this is the IEC report, and these are the highlights. I think it's really important that I read them on behalf of the Indigenous Education Council in these times of truth and reconciliation. This really puts up front and center our commitment and alignment to doing the work as a district and representing the voice of our council, Indigenous Education Council. So, IPAC held their first meeting since COVID, hosted at Lake Trail. The IPAC is the Indigenous Parents Advisory Committee, and their meetings are the first Tuesday of every month, and childcare is provided. Over 30 parents were in attendance, and every Tuesday at Lake Trail, every Tuesday evening at Lake Trail, there are culture nights and an open supervised gym for children as the childcare. So something that has been very impactful for Indigenous community and families, and to gather and share. Kumugwe Cultural Society and Indigenous Education for SD 71 are working together to provide a big house experience for grade 7s. The vision is to provide K-12 experiences throughout the student's educational career. So we're looking at students experiencing the big house not just at one time in their life, but as a process of their in their learning career. Bruce Carlos has been meeting with staff at high school, supporting graduation and post-secondary planning for Indigenous students. The staffs knew the children and were able to tell each child's story. So this was brought up at the IEC, and that our students, their challenges and their strengths and their successes are known by administration, and their learning plans are being supported. There's been an increase to the targeted Indigenous funding. So the per student funding has, for students with ancestry, has gone up to $17.10 per student. The Indigenous student count is continuing to grow and is currently at 17.5% of the SD 71 student population. Indigenous education is currently working on the 2023-24 budget process, using these numbers as part of that. IEC capacity building at Comox First Nation Hall, May 17th, 18th, currently working on creating a terms of reference and how we connect with the Comox First Nation. The Student Affordability Fund update. There's 5,000 gift cards available to families as needed in accordance with that.
I think that's $5,000 worth of increase.
Thank you. I wonder if they're all just $1 per card.
We're checking to see if we are awake.
Yep. It is 5,000. That was quite something. Whew. I'd like to get one. The Little Bears Indigenous Kindergarten and Grade 1 students presented to Vancouver Island School Trustees Association, VISTA, at the gathering at Crown Isle. The students introduced themselves in their own language, drummed, sang, and danced, providing their parents and island trustee teams with a heartwarming performance. Bruce Carlos hosted full Indigenous education staff meeting at Comox First Nation Hall. So going into community and having their staff meeting as opposed to having it on SD 71 sites. And a former Comox Valley student, Carver Everson, that I talked about, is working on polls for Dawn to Dawn at Cumberland Community School. He also is the carver of our beautiful piece of work here, To Be United Under the Whalehead. March 22nd, North Island College Festival is happening from 3:30 to 7. And students who want to go and participate, and they have waived the tuition for Indigenous students in town.
Any questions for Trustee Vice Chair Leslie? Sorry, got that right near the end of the meeting. Okay, thank you very much for your report. And next we have Trustee McConnell-Keene.
Yeah, my report from the Comox Valley Social Planning Society is attached, so I'll be very brief and just say that the most recent topic that I was able to attend in person was on March 7th. We had a presentation by Marita from Rush Valley and also by Razina Hamir, and I was grateful to hear them and meet them for the first time in person. I know that Trustee Masak recently also discussed Comox Valley food policy, so I don't want to echo too much. So I'll only say that it was widely attended. There were a lot of people just from the community there out of interest, which I thought was great. A lot of parents, and Razina specifically talked a lot about her youth group. She's starting to work with the Young Agrarians group. So we talked a lot about farming and the amount of land we have, along with the amount that's actually being used to produce crops, and that's what is actually being used here in the valley. She was talking specifically about her farming and took a moment to say that she grows crops that go all the way to New Westminster and then come back here to feed people working in the hospital, and said that we need to do better. So I appreciated sort of hearing that realistic explanation of the hardships and the work they're doing. But yeah, I think, so the next meeting coming up, we'll just say is this Monday, the 27th from 4 till 5 via Zoom, and Judy Norbury and Christopher Bate will be chairing as Betty Tate will be away, and it is the Accessibility Committee meeting, so I think that they'll be quite excited to hear some of the things that our Secretary has discussed today with the plans for the BC Accessible Act. So I'm grateful to report on this, and if you have any questions, you can always reach out, as I wrote lots of things down.
Thanks so much. All right, you heard that. Reach out to Trustee McConnell-King if you have some questions. Next is the Vista update from Trustee Katie.
So this is more of an acknowledgement. As president of Vista, I got to put on a conference for over 78 trustees, district staff from all over the island. And there are several people in the district that I would like to acknowledge, because without their help and their support, it would not have been the success that it would have been. First of all, Bruce Carlos, who's our district principal of Indigenous Education. Through him, we worked with Little Bears from Coal Puntledge and teacher Brooke Young and Jamie, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, Burrell? I'm not sure her name. Is it Burrell? Anyway, she is the Indigenous childhood educator for Coal Puntledge, who arranged for the students with their parents and guardians to come out there and perform for the Vista branch, which is really acceptable. Awesome. I was so happy about that. Also, our Secretary Treasurer, Brenda, who is the keeper of the finances. But there's one person who this is going to go to, but I was told tonight that maybe she might not take good care of it, but I'm going to entrust it with her anyways. The one person who I could not do it without was Heidi. Heidi, as the executive assistant, worked side by side. She didn't have to. I asked if she would support me, and she did. She and I worked together with the ups and downs of dealing with Crown Isle and agendas and all the other stuff. And Heidi, without your help and your support, and I know that you were going through some other times, so you were doing it from home too. On behalf of myself, President Vista, and the association, I would like to thank you from my heartful, deep heart, for your support in making our event successful. And this one here, I'm going to check after spring break, and you better have a couple of flowers on him, but this is for you as a little token of appreciation for myself for helping me. But Jeff said he'd babysit it too, so.
And Janice, I just wanted to say that it was an amazing event, and thank you for all of your work, and the Vista executive and all the trustees that pitched in near the end when you needed a hand with some logistics, and they were happy to help. It was an amazing event, and I think every trustee who attended from throughout the island walked away with way more than they had when they came. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for all coming and helping. I appreciate it.
Being mindful of time, I'm going to hope that there's going to be a trustee that would move a motion to extend our meeting to 9:20 p.m. We have one more motion. We have the public question period as well. So I'm hoping so that we have opportunity more than 6 minutes to discuss a motion that's coming before us. Trustee Aldinger, so Heidi, did you get that motion? Okay, is there a seconder? Yep. Trustee Howe, any questions? All those in favor? Down, thank you. All right. We have a motion from Vice Chair Leslie. Would you like to read your motion?
I will. That the Board of Education of School District 71, Comox Valley, directs the superintendent to review all the district policies and administrative procedures related to student health and student safety, with a focus on student health and wellness, and provide a comprehensive report, including recommendations to the board.
Is there a seconder? Trustee Aldinger. Thank you. And any trustees wish to speak on this?
I would like to give the rationale.
Okay, go ahead.
As per the December 13th presentation by Director Lamoureux on supporting student health in Comox Valley schools, and the board's discussion at the January 10th closed committee of the whole on this topic, I put forward this motion. In our governance role, as our responsibility is policy, I'm suggesting that the board review all policies referring to mental health, sexual health, student well-being, and bullying. And these are the 4 categories that are represented in the 2022 Ministry of Education Supporting Student Health Guides for elementary and secondary students. I recognize that we have Policy 17, SOGI policy, Policy 24, Equity and Non-Discrimination, AP 325, Child Abuse, AP 350, District Student Code of Conduct, and AP 355, Student Behavior and Discipline. And there may be more, but I recognize we have those policies and APs in place. And Tom, I know that this policy directs you, but my question to you is, how would you like to take action in this motion? Is this, because I think there's a few possibilities.
So I'll let the superintendent respond and then Trustee Howe.
It's, if this is the wish of the board, then my only question would be, what is the timeline that the board wishes to receive this information, knowing where we're at this particular moment in time with everything that's going on. So that would be my only request. We can figure out a way, but I would just request the consideration on the timeline.
Trustee Howe?
Yeah, my question is an admin question too, because I was thinking about this, and I'd be interested to know how recently some of these have been updated, because I remember having a conversation with Director Schatz and Barry around it. So I'm in agreement. I mean, obviously things always need to be reviewed, especially around these types of topics, but I didn't get it's my bad for not doing my homework, but I didn't get a chance to go and check. I feel like there will be some that were like fairly recently updated, but I think it's good to have a review. I'm in support of the motion. I just didn't do my homework for the exact policies to have the dates in front of me.
Are there any other trustees? Trustee King?
I guess I want a bit of clarification regarding the process. Yes, the board does policies, but the superintendent does the admin procedures, which come out of the policies. So I'm unclear of the inclusion of regarding the admin procedures related to that. Is that just for information because that's not our work.
That's right.
And I just wanted to clarify on that one there. So
Yep.
policies is our work, and I believe that they're fairly recent. And my concern would be the time frame based on the fact that we've got budget, strategic planning, principals and principals of hiring. We've got a lot on our plate with spring break. So I'm wondering, when do we want this done? Looking at the workload of senior staff, looking at spring break and all the other stuff that's going on there. So kind of time frame, what are we looking at? My concern.
Trustee Howe?
Maybe we could, after we decide on this motion, like, maybe the timeline can be what we discuss in the committee of the whole after the motion's passed or defeated. Or do you think it needs to be reflected in here? It's your motion.
I think this is as a result of 3 months ago, right? And
Yeah.
so what has happened is it's taken to this point to get back up on the table. It's just work that we really didn't attend to, and in an understanding of, yes, this is very, there's lots going on right now. It's a busy time. So I think that the timeline can be discussed at a committee of the whole at a later date. And that this is something that we can work on as a board over time as a process. Policies aren't written overnight. Right? This is something that we need to look at and work on, but show that we're committed to that direction and doing our due diligence and supporting student health and safety.
So I'm going to put myself on the list, and then I'm going to go to Trustee Kate. So my understanding of this motion, the way I read it, is that we're also trying to identify the gaps. Because of the new documentation that's come forward from the ministry, and that I don't know if we have any policy on mental health. And I don't know if there's some pieces now in the ministry documentation that give direction to the district to do work, but we may not have policy on it. So to me, this is as much about identifying the gaps, if there are any, in reporting, for then us to determine what to do next or with a recommendation. That's how I was reading it. And Trustee Kate.
Oh, I was reading it is that we're asking the superintendent to provide a comprehensive report, including recommendations to the board. That means he's going to go out, he's going to go through all our policies, find the gaps, and come back with a comprehensive report to the board at the board table to have what next. And so my concern is, I'm not disagreeing, it's a good thing, it's part of our job as trustees is to review our policies, and it does take some time. My concern and my ask is that we haven't got a timeline. This is a report, understanding that admin procedures is our senior staff when we do policies. Do we need to do this, when do we want this work brought back to the board to have this discussion? That's because you've asked for that comprehensive report. When does it want to come back to us? Because we have at our committee of the whole meeting a standing place every month for policies. So we do have a placeholder so we can have those conversations. So I'm just wanting to know is, with the report, with the recommendations, is it something that we need to, my question is when do we want it? Because we have an ask, so there has to be an outcome. So what is the outcome?
So I guess the question before the trustees is, are you comfortable passing this motion as is, or are you wanting to amend with a date? That's what I'm hearing, and that's what I'm trying to understand. I heard some trustees say, if we pass this motion, then we could have a discussion about what is a reasonable time frame. Maybe after the superintendent does like a high level something. But then I'm also hearing that there are trustees that may be wanting a finite date on this. So, Trustee Howe?
My immediate reaction is that I would be comfortable just passing the motion and then speaking to this at a committee of the whole meeting to speak in more detail with the superintendent to see what that looks like. Because I have a feeling that he's probably gonna say, okay, well, you know, maybe these two things here are very recent, within 2 years. These things we need to look at, or whatever it looks like, and it might take this, like, we're in the middle of trying to make our strategic plan and doing a bunch of things, and I'm totally respectful of that, so I feel like I'm comfortable, like, talking about this in a committee of the whole setting to detail it out. But the broad motion, I'm happy to pass.
Okay, Trustee Maysack?
Yeah, I agree, and I feel that having some flexibility in the timing, I think, would be really prudent, because I think we're all feeling the stress of the strategic planning and all the other things that are happening at this, and our budget consultation with the public is just about to go underway as well. So I agree. I like the idea of having a flexible time frame on it, but it's more decisive if we have an actual date and time that we want the answer. So it's.
Thank you. Is there any trustee who hasn't spoken who would like to speak on this? Just checking. Okay, so seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion, please show. Down, opposed, it's carried. All right, we have one piece of board correspondence. So we had a response from to our request to the Honorable Rashna Singh that they've received our request, our invitation, and that they have it in their queue. And I'm now going to ask if there are any questions that have been submitted online from the public, seeing as how we have no public in person any longer. Thank you for that. And before we adjourn, I just want to wish everybody a wonderful, safe, enjoyable restful spring break. As our district, I expect, is counting down the few days left that we have before spring break. And then we'll move to adjournment, and that the Board of Education of School District Number 71, Comox Valley, adjourn this meeting. Is there a seconder, or is there a mover? Trustee Howe, and a seconder, Trustee McCannell-Keene. All those in favor? We're adjourned.